Welcome to Keeping It G with G, the podcast. I'm your host, Gian, but you can call me G. Hence, Keeping It G with G, the podcast. To keep it G means to maintain a level of respect for oneself and those around you. And that is why this show was created, to have an open, honest, vulnerable, and accountable discussion about the ups and downs of everyday life shit as it pertains to self-improvement, love, relationships, and motherhood. So in hopes of me sharing through personal experiences from the lessons I've learned and still learning, I pray that I can shed light and share some gems that will give you that extra push that you may need as we are all growing and learning through life. I'm here to reassure my listeners that it's okay to keep it G while on your journey. Now let's start the show. Welcome to episode 60 of Keeping It G with G, the podcast. First and foremost, I want to express my gratitude to those who showed me so much love and support on the return of the podcast on last week. I received a lot of text messages and DMs, and I seen some of your comments on the podcast page, and I am infinitely grateful for your continuous love and support regarding Keeping It G with G, the podcast. So with that being said, this week's topic is higher calling, and I named it that for this week's episode because I briefly discussed on the mini episode on last week, 59, of how I wanted to take my podcast into a different direction. And I stated that because I want to talk more about topics that can help people in my age bracket, more modern shit and things that I think we're all going through and growing through. Not the cliche shit, but the real shit. I want my podcast to stick. I want y'all to really feel me and relate. And so with that being said, while on my hiatus, in which honestly this idea came to me a while ago, but of course, when a revelation or an idea comes to you, I've learned that you can't rush it and just go out there head first with it. You have to pray over it, do your homework, and get your ducks in a row so that when that time comes, you'll be spiritually and mentally prepared to deliver in the way that you need to. And so with that, I want to use my podcast platform to help others. So in a sense, I'll be sharing some gems on how to turn your pain into purpose to help others. So yeah, I'll still be doing some of what I was doing previously in terms of dropping episodes that I feel like could give y'all the extra push in regards to self-love and self-improvement. And it's very heavy on the self shit, but not in a negative way. I always have to clarify that. But more so in a way of making sure that your cup is always full and healthy so that you can pour into others healthily. God first, you second, everything else comes after. I have to be very clear with that, like I said, with discussing self-work and inner work, because it can come off as selfish. So you have to be very careful that when you're doing inner work and self-work, that you're not doing it in a demeaning way or a negative way when it comes to others. But I'll touch more on that topic in a later episode because I'll start going off on a tangent. But yeah, because everyone is on the self-love, self-work tip, in which I think is very important. I'm not dumbing that down or anything, but the journey isn't always so easy or pretty. So I want to be the one to give you the real from my perspective and what I've learned through my own experience. And I'm not at all telling you to take everything I tell you on this podcast and run with it, but you will feel this shit. And I say that very humbly. And if and when, after you listen to an episode of mine, if you feel taught or uplifted in any way, my job is done. So this will be some of the G'est shit you might ever hear in terms of life, love, relationships, friendships, family shit, and motherhood, of course. So I want to continue to share through what I've learned through my own personal experiences, vulnerably and authentically, to help my listeners out in whatever areas that they need assistance in. This is why I do my Q&A episodes, because I like to hear from you guys. I love the DMs. I love when you guys reach out to me via DM or email, like I said, and ask me questions so that I can give you feedback. I just want to change the stigma of being uncomfortable with being vulnerable with yourself and others, because if you allow yourself to be closed off or guarded in a negative way because you're scared of being judged, or you just fear of what people will think or what have you, it can really hinder your career. It can hinder your relationships with your children, your partners, your family, and your friends. Lack of being honest and vulnerable with the way you feel or things that you may have been going through or dealing with is very dangerous. So I'm always going to encourage you guys to practice being more comfortable with doing so, because that is the only way for people to get to really know you for who you truly are. Honestly, I'm not saying scream your most sacred personal business to the mountaintops or tell strangers your business. I'm saying to only do this with people you have built a bond with, your friends, your family, even a therapist, and people in which you have a responsibility to be your most vulnerable and honest, authentic self with, is what I'm saying. I had to make that clear because I don't want you guys thinking that I'm just telling you to tell anybody your business, but I'm encouraging vulnerability in the most authentic way that you're comfortable in doing so. But this message is for everyone. Vulnerability, is not weak. Let's be adults and grow the fuck up about it. Please excuse my French, but I say this all the time here, and I'm saying it again, but this time in all caps. I am just like you. I am not perfect. I am flawed, but I am accountable and learning about myself every day. And last but not least, I'm putting my best foot forward and being and becoming the best possible version of myself. I want to be the woman God wants me to be, not who I want myself to be. His plans are greater for my life, and I need all that. I need all the plans He has for me and all the blessings. So I want to position myself to receive that. But I can't do that if I'm in my own way and I'm stifling my own growth and not being authentically me. And so that is something that I have been really priding myself on doing. Not that I wasn't doing it before, but it's heightened for some particular reason. But yeah, when it comes to your calling, your higher calling and your purpose, sometimes it's right in front of you or embedded in you already, but it can get overlooked because you're too busy trying to make plans for yourself instead of letting God take the wheel of your life. Because when the idea of podcasting came up, for me, this was like 2 years ago or so, maybe longer. I tell y'all that all the time. I had bought all my equipment and I just sat on the idea for like a year or so until I finally dropped it. because I had to find my audience. I had to figure out what I want to talk about. And the more I experienced things and the more I gave advice to my family and friends, or shit, sometimes even strangers, because people are comfortable with me. I get told that a lot. Like, people will tell me, like, I'm so comfortable with telling you X, Y, Z, and I'm not sure why, but you just make me feel safe, or, and I really had to think about that, because I've been told that a lot of times in conversations with people. And so when I started podcasting and dropping episodes, and people would DM me and tell me how much it, helped them, or I get Q&As and they're asking me for advice, I'm like, this shit is bigger than me. And so I have to practice what I preach. This podcast has really forced me to step into more of the woman that God wants me to be. So, and that's why I express my gratitude and I talk my shit so much, because this podcast not only helps you, it helps me too. And so we're in this together. So, I don't like to have my episodes long and drawn out. We'll get to that point. But as I'm coming off of this hiatus, I just kind of want to revisit and reintroduce my plan, or God's plan, for the podcast. And so as the episode is getting ready to come to a close, I'll leave y'all with this. You're stepping into your purpose when your spirit forces you into wanting more for yourself. And I mean all aspects of life. When you're being forced to honor and stand grounded in your being and refuse to accept anything less than what you deserve or what you're worth. I understand that I have a higher calling with this podcast, and I'm working every day to do just that. So I am infinitely grateful for my listeners, my family and friends and supporters, and anyone who has supported me in any way. Even for the tough criticism, because I need that shit too. It helps me to grow. And so I just want to leave you guys with that. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys for the next episode of Keeping It G with G, the podcast. Have a great week. Stay blessed, and remember to be a blessing and not a burden.